The archaeological dig had taken 3 years, but Rilla finally held proof in her hands. The data crystal glowed faintly in the dim light of her research tent on the abandoned world of Dust Haven. Around her, the ruins of an ancient civilization stretched for kilometers, their builders long gone. But this crystal was different from anything her team had found before. She inserted it into her scanner and watched as symbols flickered across the display. Her breath caught. The language was unmistakable. Human writing. Real human writing. Not the fragments and half-translations that filled children's books across the galaxy. This was a complete document, pristine and intentional. Impossible, whispered her assistant, a young Tarvine named Finn who had joined the expedition fresh from university. Humans are just stories. Everyone knows that. Rilla shook her head slowly. Read the date stamp. This crystal is 847 years old. Someone left it here deliberately, preserved it, wanted it to be found. She scrolled through the contents, her eyes widening with each passing moment. Finn, get Chancellor Borum on the communication array. Right now. 2 weeks later, Rilla stood before the Galactic Assembly on Harmony Gate Station. The massive chamber held representatives from 43 species, each one watching her with varying degrees of skepticism. Some looked amused. Others appeared annoyed that their time was being wasted on fairy tales. Chancellor Borum, an elderly Haveran with silver scales and patient eyes, gestured for her to begin. Ambassador Rilla, you have requested this emergency session. The floor is yours. Rilla projected the crystal's contents onto the chamber's holographic display. What you're seeing is a message from the human species, left on Dust Haven over 8 centuries ago. It contains coordinates, technological specifications, and a promise. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The message says, if you find this, we are not gone. We are waiting. Laughter erupted from several delegations. A Kelsian representative stood, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. Ambassador, with respect, humanity is mythology. A cautionary tale parents tell their children about aggressive species that destroy themselves. There's no evidence they ever existed beyond scattered legends. That's where you're wrong, Rilla replied calmly. She pulled up another file. I've spent 15 years collecting evidence. Architectural patterns on 12 different worlds that share identical construction methods. Genetic markers in 3 species that suggest human medical intervention in their evolutionary past. Energy signatures at the edges of explored space that match known technology. She looked around the chamber. They existed. They were real. And according to this message, they still are. Admiral Kress of the Haveran Defense Fleet leaned forward in his seat. His voice was stern but curious. Even if we entertain this fantasy, why would they leave? And why leave a message behind? Rilla had prepared for this question. She displayed another section of the crystal's data. According to their own records, humanity recognized something about themselves. They were too violent, too unpredictable for a young galactic community. So they chose exile. They went to the far reaches of space to, and I quote, become worthy of the stars we wish to share. Silence fell across the chamber. The idea was radical. A species choosing to remove itself from galactic society out of self-awareness and restraint. Dr. Lissa, the Assembly's chief scientific advisor, broke the quiet. Ambassador Rilla, this is fascinating research, truly. But even if humans existed and left such a message, that was 800 years ago. If they're still out there, why haven't they returned? Before Rilla could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red. A communication officer rushed to Chancellor Borum's side, whispering urgently. The Chancellor's face went pale. We're receiving multiple distress calls, Borum announced, his voice tight. The Scourge have attacked the Vale Nebula region. 3 colony ships are under assault. Our escort fleet has been destroyed. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Scourge have been a growing threat for decades, consuming civilizations with their parasitic hive mind. But they'd never been this bold, this deep into Assembly space. Admiral Kress was already on his feet. How many ships do we have in range? None that can arrive in time, the communication officer replied. The colony ships are sending final messages. Millions of refugees, sir. There's nothing we can do. Rilla stared at the crystal, still glowing in her hand. The coordinates it contained pointed to a region beyond explored space, past the Veil Nebula. Without thinking, she activated her personal communicator and broadcast on the frequency specified in the human message. It was a desperate act, foolish even, but the alternative was watching millions die. This is Ambassador Rilla of the Galactic Assembly, she said into the void. If any humans are listening, we need help. Please. People are dying. Static answered her. The chamber had gone quiet, all eyes on her seemingly futile gesture. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Rilla felt her hope crumble. Then a voice crackled through every speaker in the station. It spoke in clear, unaccented galactic common. Ambassador Rilla, this is Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Stellar Navy. We received your transmission. We've been receiving all your transmissions for the past 200 years. There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it carried weight and determination. We're already en route. Tell those colony ships to hold on. Humanity is coming home. The crystal in Rilla's hand pulsed with light, as if responding to the message. Around the chamber, representatives sat frozen in shock. The legends were real, and they were about to discover what 800 years of self-imposed exile had made of the human race. The refugee children were crying in the cargo hold of the colony ship Peaceful Dawn. Their parents held them close, whispering comforting lies about rescue that would never come. Through the viewport, the Scourge fleet closed in like a swarm of insects, their bioships pulsing with sickly green light. Captain Vera, a Tarvine with 30 years of civilian transport experience, gripped the arms of her chair. She had never commanded during combat. Her ship was designed to carry families to new worlds, not to fight wars. The other 2 colony ships in their convoy were just as helpless. They're charging weapons, her navigator reported, voice shaking. Multiple targeting locks. All 3 ships. Vera closed her eyes. She'd already sent the final messages to the families of her crew. There was nothing left to do but wait for the end. The assembly escort ships had fought bravely, but the Scourge had torn through them in minutes. Now it was just 3 defenseless transports carrying 800,000 souls who would never see tomorrow. The Scourge lead ship opened fire. Then space itself seemed to tear apart. Massive vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel directly between the colony ships and the Scourge fleet. They were unlike any ships Vera had ever seen. Sleek hulls of dark metal, bristling with weapons that looked brutally efficient. No elegant curves or artistic flourishes. These ships were built for one purpose only: war. Unknown vessels. Identify yourselves, Vera transmitted, hardly daring to hope that a face appeared on her screen. It was humanoid, but different from any species she knew. Shorter facial structure, varied skin tones, and eyes that held an intensity she'd only seen in predators. The being smiled, and there was both warmth and danger in that expression. This is Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Stellar Navy ship, Defiant, the human said. We've got you covered, Peaceful Dawn. All colony ships, maintain current heading. Do not deviate. We'll handle this. But there are dozens of Scourge ships, Vera protested. You only have 7 vessels. Hayes' smile widened slightly. We fought worse odds. Watch and learn what happens when you threaten people under human protection. The Scourge fleet, apparently confused by these new arrivals, redirected their weapons toward the human ships. The lead Scourge vessel fired a massive bioplasma cannon, the kind that had melted through assembly cruiser shields in seconds. The human ship didn't dodge. It flew straight into the blast. Vera gasped, certain she was about to witness these mysterious rescuers destroyed. But the plasma washed over the human vessel's shields like water off stone. The ship didn't even slow down. Target their command nodes. Hayes ordered his fleet calmly. Pattern Delta 7. Let's keep this quick. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for years to come. The human ships moved with precision that seemed impossible. They didn't fight like the assembly, which focused on defensive formations and calculated exchanges. They fought like predators who had cornered prey. The Defiant launched projectiles that moved at incredible speeds. Not energy weapons, but solid metal slugs that punched through Scourge bioarmor like it was paper. Each shot was perfectly placed, targeting weak points in the alien ships with surgical accuracy. The Scourge vessels began to break apart, their organic hulls unable to withstand the kinetic impacts. Two human destroyers flanked the Scourge formation, firing what appeared to be electromagnetic pulses. The Scourge ships convulsed, their biological systems disrupted by the energy waves. They drifted helplessly, easy targets for the following barrage of missiles that a Scourge carrier, larger than 3 colony ships combined, attempted to launch fighter craft. A human frigate intercepted it, releasing a swarm of small drones that attached to the carrier's hull. Seconds later, explosions rippled across the massive ship as the drones detonated. The carrier split in half, its fighter bays destroyed before a single craft could launch. They're coordinating every move, Vera's tactical officer whispered in awe. Every shot, every maneuver. They're fighting as one unit. The entire battle lasted 14 minutes. 14 minutes from the moment the human ships arrived to the moment the last Scourge vessel exploded. Not a single human ship showed significant damage. Not one Scourge vessel survived. Captain Hayes appeared on Vera's screen again. Colony ships, this is Defiant. Threat neutralized. We're scanning for survivors and secondary threats. Are any of your people injured? Vera realized her hands were trembling. We have wounded from the initial attack. Medical supplies are running low. Transmitting coordinates for docking, Hayes replied. We'll transfer medical personnel and supplies. Our doctors can treat any species in the assembly database, which I'm guessing includes yours. You've been watching us, Vera said quietly. All this time, you've been out there watching. Hayes nodded, his expression growing serious. We monitored galactic communications for centuries. Learned your languages, studied your cultures, tracked your conflicts. We needed to understand who you'd become before we decided whether to return. He paused. The Scourge changed the timeline. We couldn't sit by any longer. A human medical team transported over to the peaceful dawn within the hour. They were efficient and gentle with the wounded, their technology healing injuries that would have taken weeks to recover from. A human doctor named Lisa worked on a Tarvine child with a broken arm, speaking softly to calm the scared little one. Your people really are legends in our stories, Vera told Hayes as the medical team worked. Tales of warriors from the stars who disappeared before our grandparents were born. Hayes looked at the view screen, showing Earth's blue marble in the distance. We weren't warriors when we left. We were dangerous, aggressive, and too proud to admit our flaws. We left to become better than what we were. He turned back to her. We spent 800 years learning discipline, patience, and purpose. Now we're ready to fight alongside you, not against you. Will you come to the assembly? Vera asked. Tell them what you told me. Already transmitting coordinates to Harmony Gate, Hayes confirmed. Every human ship in range is being recalled from patrol. It's time the galaxy met humanity properly. As the Defiant escorted the colony ships towards safety, Vera watched the human vessels move with practiced coordination. They had returned after centuries, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to accept them. The observation deck on Harmony Gate had never been so crowded. Representatives from every assembly species pressed against the viewports, staring at the human fleet holding position just outside the station's defensive perimeter. 50 warships floated in perfect formation, each one carrying technology and capabilities that made military analysts nervous. Rilla stood apart from the crowd, watching a small shuttle detach from the lead human vessel. She'd been the one to call them here, to broadcast that desperate plea. Now our people would either gain powerful allies or discover they'd invited something dangerous into their home. Chancellor Borum arrived beside her, his silver scales reflecting the light from the ships outside. Are you certain about this, Rilla? Once we allow them to dock, there's no going back. They saved 800,000 lives in the Veil Nebula, Rilla replied. They could have ignored our call. They didn't. That tells me everything I need to know. The shuttle docked without incident. Security teams flanked the airlock, weapons ready but not raised. The door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure point 3. Humans walked through. The first was a woman in a formal military uniform decorated with symbols that meant nothing to galactic observers but clearly held significance. She was tall, dark-skinned, with hair pulled back in a tight style. Her eyes swept the reception area with professional assessment before she smiled warmly. "Chancellor Borum," she said, extending her hand in what Rilla recognized as a human greeting gesture. "I'm Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Stellar Navy. It's an honor to finally meet you face to face." Borum hesitantly grasped her hand, and Torres shook it firmly before releasing. "Admiral, your arrival has caused considerable discussion among my people." "I imagine it has," Torres acknowledged. She gestured to her companions. "This is General William Wright, commander of our ground forces, and Dr. Nora Patel, our civilian cultural advisor. We've brought gifts as a gesture of goodwill." The humans produced containers that security teams immediately scanned. Inside were medical supplies, technical specifications for defensive shields, and something that made Dr. Lissa gasp: complete genetic databases for food crops that could grow on a dozen different world types. "You're giving us this technology freely?" Lissa asked, unable to hide her shock to Doctor. Patel nodded, her expression earnest. "We've spent 800 years advancing while watching you struggle with problems we'd already solved. Sharing knowledge seems like the least we can do." The formal assembly session began an hour later. The massive chamber was packed beyond capacity, with junior representatives standing in the aisles. Torres stood at the center podium, every eye in the room focused on her. "Members of the Galactic Assembly," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber speakers. "I won't pretend this moment isn't strange for all of us. Your people grew up believing humanity was a myth. My people grew up watching you from a distance, wondering if we'd ever be welcomed home." She activated a holographic display showing Earth. "This is our homeworld, a planet that taught us hard lessons about survival, conflict, and the cost of pride. When our ancestors achieved faster-than-light travel, they encountered your predecessors and realized something terrifying. We were the most aggressive species anyone had ever met." The chamber remained silent, hanging on every word. "Humans fought wars over resources, ideologies, and simple misunderstandings," Torres continued. "We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we reached the stars. When we met peaceful species who'd never known such violence, we understood we were dangerous. Not evil, but dangerous. So humanity made a choice." General Wright stepped forward, his voice gruff but respectful. "We left, voluntarily exiled ourselves to the galactic rim. We spent 8 centuries learning to control our aggressive instincts, developing discipline and purpose. We studied your transmissions, learned from your peaceful societies, and worked to become worthy of rejoining galactic civilization. But you remained warriors," Admiral Kress interrupted from his seat. "Your rescue of the colony ships proved that. You fight with an efficiency that borders on frightening." Torres nodded slowly. "We did remain warriors, because we recognized something important. Sometimes peace requires people willing to fight for it. We didn't abandon our nature. We refined it, focused it, made it serve a purpose beyond ourselves. Which brings us to why we returned," Dr. Patel added, her tone becoming serious. "The Scourge. We've been monitoring their expansion for 30 years. They represent an existential threat to every sentient species in this galaxy. Your defensive strategies are failing because you're fighting them like a conventional enemy. They're not. They're a parasitic hive mind that adapts and consumes everything in its path." Torres pulled up tactical data showing Scourge expansion rates. The projections were grim. At their current rate, the Scourge will consume the entire assembly within 20 years. Every world, every species gone. We can't allow that to happen. "So you offer yourselves as mercenaries?" A Kelsian representative challenged. "Sell us your military might in exchange for what? Territory? Resources? We offer ourselves as allies, General Wright corrected firmly. We don't want payment. We want partnership. You've built something beautiful here. Dozens of species coexisting peacefully. Humanity gave up our place in the galaxy once because we weren't ready for it. We're not giving up again because some parasitic nightmare decides to consume everything we've watched grow for 800 years. Rilla stood from her seat. I believe them, Chancellor. Their actions support their words. They could have revealed themselves at any time, especially when they had technological advantages. They waited until we needed them most. Chancellor Borum looked around the chamber, reading the mixed reactions of his fellow representatives. Fear, hope, suspicion, and gratitude warred on different faces. Finally, he spoke. Admiral Torres, humanity's return raises many questions. But the Scourge threat is undeniable. I propose we accept Earth's offer of military alliance on a provisional basis. 6 months to prove your intentions and coordinate our forces. Torres saluted, a crisp military gesture. 6 months to save the galaxy. We'll take it. Thank you, Chancellor. As the session adjourned, Rilla approached Torres. What you said about becoming worthy. Did you succeed? Torres smiled, but there was sadness in it. We're better than we were. Still aggressive, still dangerous when threatened. But now we fight for others, not ourselves. I suppose history will judge if that's worthy enough. The training grounds of Forward Base Atlas stretched across 10 square kilometers of a barren moon. Prefabricated structures housed soldiers from 15 different species, all gathered to learn how humans fought wars. In the central drill yard, a Tarvine squad leader named Dowlin watched human Marines run through combat exercises with a mixture of fascination and unease. They moved differently than any soldiers he'd ever seen. Fast, aggressive, constantly adapting their positions. A human sergeant named Paulo Mendez barked orders, and the Marines responded instantly, flowing through formations that seemed chaotic until Dowlin realized every movement had purpose. They fight like predators, whispered Finn, the young Tarvine who'd assisted Rilla during her archaeological expedition. He joined the military when the Human Alliance was announced. Look at their eyes. They're always scanning for threats. Mendez approached their observation position, his expression friendly despite his intimidating build. Squad leader Dowlin? General Wright asked me to work with your unit. Show you some basic human infantry tactics. Dowlin straightened respectfully. Sergeant, my soldiers are experienced, but we've never faced an enemy like the Scourge. We're eager to learn. Over the next week, Mendez taught them things that contradicted everything they'd learned in assembly military academies. Humans didn't believe in minimal force doctrine. They believed in overwhelming response. When threatened, you didn't retreat to fortified positions and wait for reinforcements. You pushed forward, seized initiative, made the enemy react to you instead of the other way around. It feels wrong, admitted one of Dowlin's soldiers, a young female named Kessa. We're trained to preserve life, minimize casualties on both sides. Mendez nodded patiently. Against most enemies, that's admirable. But the Scourge don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume everything they touch. Showing mercy gets your entire squad killed and the planet behind you infected. He paused, his voice softening. We don't teach aggression because we enjoy violence. We teach it because sometimes it's the only language an enemy understands. During a break, Dowlin sat with Mendez in the mess hall. Human food was surprisingly bland compared to Tarvine cuisine, but the sergeant ate with obvious enjoyment. Can I ask you something personal? Dowlin ventured. Your people spent 800 years trying to become less violent, but you're still warriors. How do you reconcile that? Mendez set down his fork, considering the question carefully. My grandfather told me something when I joined the military. He said violence isn't evil by itself. It's a tool. What matters is why you use it and what you're protecting. We left the galaxy because we used violence for pride, for conquest, for stupid reasons. Now we use it to protect people who can't protect themselves. That makes all the difference. An alarm interrupted their conversation. Scourge signatures detected in a nearby system. A mining colony with 50,000 workers was under attack. Human and assembly forces scrambled to their ships, The journey took 3 hours at maximum, faster than light speed. When they arrived, the colony was already under siege. Scourge bioships had landed and were spreading infection across the surface. The colony's defense force was pinned down, buying time for evacuations. All units, this is General Wright, the radio crackled. Human forces will establish a perimeter around the evacuation zones. Assembly forces, coordinate with your attached human advisors. Remember your training. Fight smart, fight hard, and bring everyone home. Dowlin's squad deployed alongside Mendez's Marines. They hit the ground running, literally. The scourge had already infected the colony's outer buildings, their organic corruption spreading like a disease. The first wave hit them within minutes. Scourge warrior forms, twisted combinations of a species they'd consumed. They moved fast, coordinated by the hive mind, attacking with no regard for their own survival. Dowlin's training kicked in. He fired precisely, conserving ammunition, falling back to defensible positions. It was textbook assembly combat doctrine. It was also failing. The scourge kept coming, overwhelming their position through sheer numbers. Then Mendez did something that seemed insane. He charged forward. "Ramirez, Peters, with me!" the sergeant shouted. Everyone else, suppressing fire. "Dowlin, keep your people behind us." The human Marines rushed into the scourge swarm with weapons blazing. But they weren't reckless. Each movement was calculated, each position chosen to maximize cover and crossfire. They used the scourge's aggression against them, funneling the enemy into kill zones. Dowlin watched in amazement as 3 humans held off 30 scourge warriors. When one Marine's weapon overheated, another stepped into the gap seamlessly. They fought as a single unit, anticipating each other's movements. "Push forward," Mendez ordered. "Don't let them set the tempo." Dowlin made a decision. "Squad, advance. Stay behind the humans, but keep moving." His soldiers looked uncertain but obeyed. The combined force drove the scourge back, clearing a path for the evacuating colonists. It was brutal, exhausting work, but worked. The humans' aggressive tactics created momentum that the scourge couldn't counter. When the last transport lifted off safely, Dowlin's squad had suffered 0 casualties. The humans had taken hits, but their armor and medical technology kept them fighting. Mendez had a nasty burn on his arm from scourge bioacid, but he waved off concern. "Good work today," the sergeant told Dowlin as they waited for extraction. "You adapted fast. Most assembly soldiers freeze up the first time we push forward like that." "You saved my soldiers," Dowlin said quietly. "My tactics would have gotten them killed. You put yourselves at greater risk to protect us." Mendez shrugged. "That's what allies do. Besides, you'll learn. Give it a few more missions, and you'll be the one teaching new recruits how to fight like humans." That evening, Dowlin found Rilla reviewing combat reports in her quarters on Harmony Gate. She'd been appointed as the official liaison between human and assembly forces. "They're not what I expected," Dowlin admitted. "The legends made humans sound like unstoppable warriors who felt no fear. But they're afraid just like us. They bleed just like us. They just choose to fight anyway." Rilla smiled. "That's what makes them remarkable. They're not fearless. They're brave. There's a difference. Will we ever fight like them?" Dowlin asked. "I don't think we need to," Rilla replied thoughtfully. "They're teaching us to be more aggressive, and we're teaching them patience and diplomacy. Maybe together, we'll find a balance neither species could achieve alone." Outside the window, human and assembly ships flew patrol together. The partnership was still new, still uncertain. But on a small mining colony, it had saved 50,000 lives. That seemed like a good start. Intelligence reports covered every surface of the strategy room aboard the human flagship Unity. Admiral Torres studied the holographic display showing the abyssal sector, a region of space so remote that most species had never bothered exploring it. But human deep space probes had found something there that changed everything. The Scourge primary hive cluster. 17 planet-sized organisms, reported Commander Nash, Torres's intelligence officer. Each one capable of producing thousands of bioships per day. If we don't destroy this cluster, the Scourge will eventually overrun the entire galaxy. General Wright stood with his arms crossed, his expression grim. Every simulation we've run says this is a one-way trip. The defenses around that cluster are too strong. We'd lose most of the fleet just getting close enough to do damage. Then we make sure that damage counts, Torres replied firmly. She looked around the room at her senior officers. I won't order anyone on a suicide mission, but I'm going. Anyone who wants to volunteer is welcome. Anyone who doesn't should leave now with no judgment. Nobody moved. Not a single officer stepped toward the door. Admiral Kress entered the room, accompanied by Chancellor Borim and Rilla. The Havran military commander looked uncomfortable but determined. Our analysts agree with your assessment, Admiral Torres. This mission is extremely dangerous. But if you're willing to lead it, the Assembly will provide support. How much support? Wright asked skeptically. 47 vessels from 12 different species, Borim answered. Volunteers all. They want to fight beside humanity. He paused. Including my own flagship. Torres studied the elderly chancellor with new respect. You're a politician, not a soldier. You don't need to risk yourself. My people are warriors by tradition, Borim replied. I may be old, but I remember how to fight. Besides, if humanity's legends are willing to die for our galaxy, the least I can do is stand with them. The fleet assembled at the edge of the abyssal sector 3 days later. 200 human warships and 47 assembly vessels, each one crewed by people who understood they might not return. Dowland's transport ship joined the formation, carrying him and Sergeant Mendez's combined unit. This is crazy, Finn whispered as they prepared for departure. We're flying straight into the heart of the Scourge Empire. That's exactly why it might work, Mendez replied, checking his weapons one final time. They won't expect anyone to be this aggressive. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the most dangerous plan is the one nobody thinks you're crazy enough to try. Captain Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiant, the same ship that had saved the colony vessels months ago. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, but he could see the tension in their faces. They all knew what was coming. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. The fleet-wide communication activated. In a few minutes, we're going to jump directly into the Hive cluster's gravity well. The Scourge will respond with everything they have. Our job is simple. Survive long enough to destroy those Hive planets. Fight for each other. Fight for the innocent people counting on us. And if the worst happens, make sure every shot counts. The fleet jumped, space twisted, and they emerged in hell. The Hive cluster filled the view screens, massive organic structures that pulsed with grotesque life. And surrounding them were thousands of Scourge ships, far more than any intelligence report had suggested. All ships, implement defensive formation Omega, Torres ordered calmly despite the overwhelming odds. Create overlapping fields of fire. Make them come through us to reach the hives. The Scourge fleet attacked immediately. Bioplasma and acid projectiles filled the space between the fleets. Human ships returned fire with kinetic weapons and missiles, while assembly vessels added their energy weapons to the barrage. The battle became a brutal contest of endurance. The Defiant shook as Scourge fire hammered its shields. Hayes gripped his chair. Damage report. Shields at 60%, his engineer called out. We can't take much more of this, sir. All around them, ships were fighting desperately. A Kelshian cruiser exploded as Scourge Bio ships swarmed it. 2 human destroyers sacrificed themselves to cover an assembly medical frigate's retreat. The formation was holding, but barely dot on the ground assault. Dowland's unit fought through a hive planet surface. The organic landscape pulsed beneath their feet, tried to infect and consume them. Mendez led the charge toward a massive neural node that controlled the hive's defenses. Plant the charges, the sergeant ordered. We got 5 minutes before this whole place realizes we're here. Dowland soldiers worked alongside human marines, setting explosive devices that would trigger a chain reaction. The Scourge defenders swarmed them, but the combined unit held firm. They'd learned to fight together, trust each other, rely on each other's strengths in space. Torres made the hardest decision of her career. The fleet was being overwhelmed. They'd inflicted heavy damage, but not enough. The hive cluster would survive. unless someone did something desperate. All ships, this is Torres. Execute final protocol. Form a sphere around the primary hive and concentrate all fire. Fighters, create a defensive screen. We're not leaving until this is finished. The fleet compressed into a tighter formation, sacrificing mobility for concentrated firepower. It was a last stand, and everyone knew it. But the humans had taught the assemblies something important. Sometimes you win by refusing to quit. The Defiant's shields finally failed. Bioacid ate through the hull, systems failing one by one. Hayes watched his ship die around him. All crew, evacuate to the escape pods, he ordered. Then he looked at his bridge crew. Except us. We're staying. His officers nodded understanding. The Defiant might be dying, but she could still serve one final purpose. Hayes aimed his crippled ship directly at the largest Scourge command vessel and engaged the engines. The Defiant accelerated, a missile of metal and determination. When they struck, the explosion tore through both ships and created an opening in the Scourge defenses. Through that opening, the fleet poured everything they had. Missiles, kinetic rounds, energy weapons, all focused on the primary hive planet. The massive organism shuddered, its surface cracking and splitting. Then it exploded, the chain reaction spreading to the other hive planets one by one. The organic worlds died. The Scourge fleet, suddenly cut off from their central intelligence, fell into confusion. The surviving human and assembly ships pressed their advantage, destroying the leaderless bio ships. When the battle finally ended, the fleet had lost 47 human ships and 19 assembly vessels. Thousands of good people were gone, including Captain Hayes and his entire bridge crew. But the hive cluster was destroyed, the Scourge broken and scattered. Dallin stood on the scarred surface of the dead hive planet, watching the debris field above. Mendez stood beside him, wounded but alive. Was it worth it? Dallin asked quietly. Mendez looked at the stars, thinking of his fallen comrades. Ask the billions of people who won't be consumed by the Scourge now. I think they'd say yes. The memorial wall on Harmony Gate stretched 50 meters long, each panel displaying the names of those who'd fallen in the Battle of the Abyssal Sector. Representatives from every species stood in respectful silence as Admiral Torres placed Captain Hayes' command insignia at the base of the human section. The small metal badge seemed inadequate to represent a man who'd sacrificed everything, but it was all she had left of her friend. Rilla stood near the front of the gathering, watching human and assembly soldiers comfort each other across species barriers. A Tarvine officer embraced a human marine, both grieving lost comrades. Chancellor Borum, who'd survived the battle aboard his flagship, spoke quietly with General Wright about the fallen. I never believed in legends before, a young voice said beside Rilla. She looked down to find a Kelshan child, no more than 6 years old, holding a small drawing. But my parents says the humans saved us. Are they really not legends anymore? Rilla knelt to the child's level, studying the drawing. It showed human and alien ships flying together among the stars. They were never legends, little one. They were just people waiting for the right time to come home. 3 months passed. The Scourge, without their central hive cluster, fractured into scattered remnants. Individual bioships still posed threats, but the unified invasion force was broken. Human and assembly fleets patrolled together, hunting down the remaining Scourge elements. On Forward Base Atlas, the training programs had evolved. Now, it wasn't just humans teaching assembly forces. Tarvine officers instructed human marines in patience and tactical flexibility. Havern strategists shared defensive doctrines that humans incorporated into their own planning. The exchange went both ways, creating something new, a truly unified military force. Dowlin found himself promoted to squadron commander, leading mixed-species units. His second-in-command was a human named Lieutenant Sarah Park, who'd lost her entire family when the Scourge destroyed Earth's colony on New Vancouver. They'd formed an unlikely friendship built on shared loss and mutual respect. Your people still fight too aggressively sometimes, Dowlin told her during a tactical review. You take unnecessary risks. Sarah grinned. And your people still overthink every situation. Sometimes you just need to act. She pulled up a battle simulation. But together, we're covering each other's weaknesses. The mixed units are performing better than pure human or pure assembly squads. The data supported her claim. Casualty rates were down. Mission success rates were up. The partnership was working. On Earth, the first galactic delegation arrived to enormous fanfare. Rilla led the group, which included representatives from 20 species. They toured human cities, met with civilian leaders, and experienced human culture firsthand. The diversity surprised many visitors. Humans came in countless variations of appearance, spoke hundreds of languages, and practiced thousands of different cultural traditions. Your species is not unified? Asked a Tarvine diplomat, confused. You have so many divisions. Dr. Nora Patel, serving as their guide, smiled. We're unified in the ways that matter. We disagree about many things, but we agree on protecting each other and the people we care about. Unity doesn't mean sameness. It means choosing to work together despite our differences. The observation resonated with many visitors. The assembly had always struggled with species who wanted to maintain their individual cultures while cooperating on galactic matters. Humanity had somehow achieved that balance within a single species. Back on Harmony Gate, Chancellor Borum addressed the full assembly. 6 months ago, I stood before you and proposed a provisional alliance with humanity. That trial period has ended. Today, I propose we make this partnership permanent. I propose offering humanity full membership in the Galactic Assembly. The debate lasted 3 days. Some species remained nervous about human aggression. Others argued that humanity had proven their worth with blood and sacrifice. In the end, the vote wasn't even close. 41 species voted yes. Only 2 abstained. None voted no. Admiral Torres received the news aboard the Unity. She stood on the bridge, looking at Earth through the viewport, and allowed herself a rare moment of emotion. 800 years, 8 centuries of exile, of watching from a distance, of wondering if they'd ever be welcomed home. Now it was official. Humanity belonged to the galaxy again. General Wright found her there. We did it. Hayes would have been proud. We all did it, Torres corrected. Humans, Tarvine, Havrin, Kelshin, all of us. That's what makes this different from before. We're not conquerors this time. We're partners. Cultural exchange programs exploded across human and assembly space. Human universities welcomed alien students. Assembly schools taught human history and literature. Mixed species crews became common on both military and civilian vessels. The barriers that had existed for 800 years dissolved surprisingly quickly. Sergeant Mendez, now promoted to lieutenant, taught a class on human military history to a mixed-species audience at the new Galactic Defense Academy. He showed them footage of ancient Earth wars, explaining how humans had learned from their mistakes. We fought each other for stupid reasons, he told his students. Resources, pride, fear. We nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times. But every war taught us something. We learned that violence without purpose is waste. That strength without restraint is tyranny. That courage without compassion is just cruelty. A young human cadet raised his hand. Sir, how do we make sure we don't repeat those mistakes? Mendez looked around the classroom at the different species learning together. By remembering we're not alone anymore. Our ancestors fought because they forgot they were all human. We won't forget we're all people, no matter how many legs we walk on or how many eyes we see with. Years later, Rilla published her comprehensive history of humanity's return. She titled it The Legends Who Came Home. The book became required reading across the galaxy, studying not just what humans did, but why they did it. The choice to exile themselves. The decision to return. The willingness to sacrifice for others. On the final page, she wrote, Humanity believed they were too dangerous to remain among us. We believed they were too mythical to exist at all. Both assumptions were wrong. They were never legends. They were never monsters. They were just people trying to be better than they were. And in the end, that made them exactly what the galaxy needed. A generation after humanity's return, a Tarvine child and a human child played together in a park on Harmony Gate. They were practicing for a school presentation about the Battle of the Abyssal Sector. The Tarvine child asked her human friend if humans were still scary. The human child thought about it seriously. My grandmother says we can be scary when we need to protect people. But mostly we're just people, like everyone else. The Tarvine child nodded, satisfied with that answer. Above them, human and assembly ships patrolled together, protecting a galaxy that had learned an important lesson. Legends don't save the day. People do. And sometimes, the best people are the ones who spend 800 years learning to be worthy of stars.